Jesse Berst of SmartGridNews, and we're talking today about best practices for IT and OT convergence. We just heard from Jeff Meyers of Schneider-Electric, and I do have one question, Jeff from Ravindra, and he wants to know if you've seen IT and OT managed in the same function in a business.
Well, this is Jeff speaking again. Yeah, that's a good question. And maybe Fred would be a good person to sort of give that example later, Jesse. But I would say I have seen that work in some places, especially where the business has owned more business-oriented IT. Things like OMS, outage management systems, as an example. If the business is, tends to support that kind of thing, then all the operational technology that integrates with it, typically the business, that sort of puts both of those things in one function. Now, I don't have personally an example of the reverse, where the IT group owned the enterprise system and also all of the operational technology outside. But again, maybe Fred's example will shed a little more light on some of those ideas.
Terrific. And Robert wants to know, how is IT-OT convergence facilitating compliance with energy management systems, and I would add, and advanced distribution management systems?
That is an excellent question, and I think an excellent insight into probably one of the most important drivers here, Robert. For me, the truly smarter grid is that integrated energy management ability, and Jesse, probably enabled in part by advanced DMS, by better distribution management systems. So sort of think about it like this. Today, when we have a load shedding event or a load curtailment requirement, we have a variety of ways that we go about asking customers to curtail their load. We sort of broadcast that, and in most cases, we broadcast and ask for system-wide load curtailment, and we have statistics about how much we're going to get based. So if we need 20 megawatts, let's say, perhaps we ask for 25, knowing that everyone will be able to comply, and then it kind of comes where it comes. But if you imagine a smarter grid, an operational technology, smarter enabled grid, with an advanced DMS perhaps as the brain, you could sort of think about where in my system do I need energy management? What feeders are weak? What substations might be close to being overloaded? And I could dial in my request for load curtailment, optimize my network as best I could first, and then dial in my request and say, okay, these are the areas where it would really help me to curtail load today. And then send out that request and get whatever load curtailment I happen to be able to achieve through closed-loop automation, be able to get feedback and see, okay, what have we really achieved? How much load have we been able to shed? How much have we been able to shift? And then redial in my network optimization to take advantage of those specific characteristics of the grid and just sort of use that closed-loop idea to really make energy management smart. So for me, Robert, that is the smarter grid right there, integrated energy management, or we sometimes say integrated demand response.
Thanks, Jeff. Very helpful. More questions, but I think in the interest of time, let's move on. We'll pause a couple more times for additional questions. We are talking about best practices for IT-OT convergence, and I want to bring up John Dirkman from Schneider-Electric. He's an EE with many years working on many aspects of the smart grid, and today he drives Schneider's technical vision for the smart grid. So if there's something on your wish list, John's your guy.
Thank you, Jesse. Yeah, I want to discuss specific processes you can go through at your utility to align your IT and OT systems and your IT and OT cultures, and kind of a flow chart you can walk through to make this happen. Number one, as Jeff has said, determining your smart grid business drivers and goals. So whether your utility wants to be more focused on improvements to safety, reliability, efficiency, customer engagement, etc., what are your pain points? What are your drivers? Really, where do you want to go with your smart grid systems? From that, you're going to develop your smart grid roadmap, which says more specifically which smart grid systems and which smart grid devices will satisfy your business drivers. And then there's a time component of this. So often this is a phased approach. When you're going to bring these different systems online, and how do they have to work together? From that, you will develop your smart grid business case. Okay, set out your costs and your benefits for your smart grid implementation, get buy-in from your executive team, get resources committed to make your projects happen. That will flow into detailed business process workflows and use cases. So which people's jobs are going to change and how are they going to change? I've got more slides on that in a minute. But what I want to emphasize here is throughout this entire process, this is bringing people together with knowledge of the IT systems and the OT systems within the organization and how they have to work together. Very important, and Jeff talked about this quite a bit, is developing your overall system architecture and your topology. Where is your system? What do you need to bring together and physically to make your system happen? You want to have an overall architecture. You may end up subdividing this into phases based on how you phased your implementation. But it's very, very important. You want to discuss your uptime, your redundancy, and your disaster recovery requirements, and also how you might want to virtualize your system to reduce your server counts and to operate your server farm more efficiently. Also, certainly look at your communication requirements. So what data needs to flow? How does that data need to flow? And what are the requirements? Do you have the communication backbone in place to make that happen? And of course, security. What level of security is required? Do different pieces of your smart grid implementation fall under different standards? Are some covered by NERC and others aren't, for example? And then, of course, plan accordingly for your system hardening, your penetration testing. How are you going to ensure that you have the security levels that you need? Again, it's going to totally require input from IT and OT sides of your organization and bringing that all together into this architecture. That will then feed into your integration requirements and your data flow. And as Jeff has said, this is very, very important. This is a massive integration of data for smart grid. So whether you're looking at pulling data from the GIS, the CIS, et cetera, that all needs to come together in your system. This often requires integration of data siloed within your organization. And I've seen many meetings where people come together for the first time and they say, oh, I didn't even know you had that data. That would be useful to me. So this whole process of discussion, of collaboration is great to see us come together in order to build your smart grid and to make your organization more efficient. Okay, that will lead into a thorough data analysis. So systems within your smart grid implementation, especially in advanced DMS, are only as good as the source data you have to feed them. The data has to be complete, has to be current, has to be correct. Okay, so you need to ask yourselves, do you have the data you need? Is it of sufficient quality? And what processes might need to change within your organization to make sure that the data is of sufficient quality to satisfy your business drivers? Similarly, number 8 is to conduct a thorough device analysis. So what devices are you using now? What devices do you need to implement on your system, especially focusing on distribution automation or whatever pieces satisfy your business drivers. Okay? Of course, include communication systems within this, how the systems need to communicate and work together. And number 9, make sure you have a solid project management capability. Make sure your project manager or management team is ready, is trained, and is ready to lead the organization, bringing together these diverse technologies within your organization. Throughout this whole process, again, collaboration between IT and OT personnel is essential, and only through successful collaboration can you really arrive at a successful smart grid implementation. A specific example here is establishing the project teams within your organization. So this is one example of a very large implementation of ADMS we did for a very large utility. There's no one single solution to this team structure, but it will definitely require input of people knowledgeable of your IT and your OT systems. So how this one was broken down, at the top, certainly you want a steering committee and your executive sponsors. You want them to buy into the system, to buy into the process and the changes. You want to appraise them of the progress of your project. And they can help you. They can help you balance resources if there are resource constraints, help make broader decisions within your organization. Project management team, of course, very important. In this case, we broke it down into integration, infrastructure, operations, etc. Again, no one solution, but just different ways to break it down. Also, of course, just to repeat, this involves people from both sides, knowledge from both sides of the utility. One thing I like about working with Burbank is they have a process called building a project charter. This is a document, it's very detailed, that they start before the project even starts within their organization. Okay? It shows the background, how this project fits into their overall smart grid requirements, gives a description, detailed requirements, deliverables, phasing, schedule, benefits, etc. Okay? The internal collaboration they go through to build this helps to bring in the right people, to make sure the right people have input, make sure people are bought into this process before you embark upon project implementation. Okay, some details about business process mapping. Number one, of course, identifying your business process drivers, as Jeff has covered earlier. That is going to lead into your defined business processes. The first thing I want to do is model your as-is processes. Then convert those and understand how those need to change to be your to-be processes. And sometimes just establishing, just meeting again on those current methods is valuable within your organization and leads to enlightenment within your organization. That will go into a gap analysis where you'll identify which roles are impacted, which action items you need to take to mitigate those impacts. That will drive into a change management plan and a training plan. So this whole piece is very, very important. Understand how your organization is going to change to bring together these systems to achieve your smart grid drivers. This is a good example of an as-is methodology matrix for advanced DMS implementation. And along the left-hand side of your screen are different work functions within ADMS. Along the top are different steps within those work functions. So this is the as-is process again. So for example, for permits, the researching of permits before they're issued is a manual process, right, where paper maps have to be looked at to find out what the current state of the network is. The process for requesting, issuing, receiving, and returning is all done either by either phone or radio. And then in this case, there really aren't an easy way to get metrics about that permitting process. How many did we do? What was the length of those permits? Or how long did they take to execute? Were there any changes along the way? There's not a lot of details on that. So it's kind of a very visual way at a high level to show which business processes need to change. And that will lead into your to-be methodology. So in this case, this utility said, we want our advanced DMS to be the brain center for operations. We want to use it for researching, for issuing, receiving, returning information. We want to couple that with mobile DMS technology so we can have our field crews insight into that DMS and keep it as real-time as possible. We also want to use ADMS for understanding the metrics. So how many did we do? How can we make this process better? So again, you can see big changes in this utility from the as-is to the to-be. And understanding this ahead of time is very, very important. The last example I have is a heat map of a stakeholder impact assessment. So on the left-hand side are different user groups in your organization. And along the top are different requirements and functions of the ADMS. So very simply, like field crews are going to be significantly impacted by changes to the switch order management process. So a very easy way to high level to say, where do I need to focus my change management? Right? What do I need to really worry about? What business processes are going to change the most? And how do I make that happen? This, of course, is all about collaboration between the IT and the OT sides and bringing these systems together. And with that, I can turn it over to questions.
So thank you very much to John Dirkman of Schneider-Electric as we talk today about best practices for IT and OT convergence.